Hello and welcome to GeekVerse Sidequest, your weekly stop for video game news, reviews, and more here on the GeekVerse Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dylan Muss, and today I'm joined by a special guest. He has made his appearance. This is his second time on the podcast, I should say. He was here for the Elden Ring spoiler cast. He's back again to talk about the Steam Deck. Cooper, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks, Dylan. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm doing really well. Glad to be on. This is a super exciting topic for me. I'm a big fanboy of Valve and everything to do with their products. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, Steam Deck review, that's what we're talking about today. That's pretty much it. We're going to go pretty nitty-gritty on the detail there, but yeah, Cooper's had the Steam Deck for 3-4 weeks at this point, so you've had a good amount of time with it. And then I was at your place and messed around with it for a couple hours too, so I've held it in my hand. I can speak a little bit on it as well. But yeah, let's get a couple of the plugs out of the way. One, make sure to join the GeekVerse Patreon. That's a good place to go because you can get episodes early and ad-free. This is a good example because this episode we're recording about a week in advance from when it's actually posting, so you could be listening to this 7 days early. That's pretty cool. Ad-free, of course, as well. Make sure to subscribe to that Sidequest feed on your podcast app as well. Join the GeekVerse Discord. It's a good place to hang out. The Twitters, Facebooks, GeekVerse.ca, all that fun stuff. Thank you to Amanda, who does the music for the show, and Taylor, who does the thumbnails. I think with that, I'm kind of down to just get right into it. So the Steam Deck, as I said, Cooper, how long have you had this thing? Is it three weeks, 4 weeks?
I've had it for about 3.5 weeks, and I was I guess it came at a good time. I had injured my back right when the Steam Deck arrived, so I was bedridden and barely moving around. So I was really hands-on with it and using it extensively for that 2-week period.
Good stuff. So yeah, we're gonna do all the review stuff, but we kind of want to do a little bit of a history around it and really make this like a full circle kind of thing. So let's start talking a little bit about the history of it. And Coop, I'll let you take it away here because you were the one who was, knocking on the door the first day they had these things up and probably keeping close eye on all the announcements and stuff. So let's talk a little bit about the history.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the Steam Deck was first announced last year, July 15th. Reservations went up the next day, July 16th, and its popularity ended up crashing the Steam web store, which, I mean, if you're a PC gamer, you use Steam, you've probably never or very rarely seen the Steam website go down. So the popularity...
I don't think I have ever in my, whatever it is, 10, 15 years.
And this was also at the height of kind of the GPU, rush on supply. Right. Nobody was able to get any graphics cards. So good chance that a lot of people were putting down reservations just for, the opportunity to maybe resell them. The way that Valve went about doing this for reservations, I think, was smart. You put down a $5 refundable deposit. That basically secured your place in line. So you had to already have a Steam account, and I believe you needed to have a certain number of play time on that account or have purchased something previously. I can't remember what the actual qualification was, but it was essentially just there to make sure that people weren't, creating fake accounts to reserve as many as they could. Keep the
scalpers out of there as best they could.
Right. And I think they did a good job. From what it seems like, most people, there's not a huge resale market right now for Steam Decks, which is what we see with graphics cards. A lot of people are buying them, selling them brand new in box. Steam Deck, that's pretty rare right now. Most of the Steam Decks are going to people who are actually using them. They did have an early supply for developers as well, so that they were able to get their hands on it and start making their applications and software compatible with the Steam Deck. So yeah, I think they've taken a very responsible approach to launching the device. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna lead us into I guess Steam, or Valve, I should say, has done I feel like in the last 10 years, maybe 5 years or so, I feel like they've been trying to launch a bunch of different things with, I'll say, a moderate level of success. I don't think anything's been a financial bomb, but I also don't think anything's become a household name.
Definitely.
In the way that the Steam Deck has really. I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to ask just a casual person who doesn't really play any video games if they even have heard of the Steam Deck. But I think at least within the gaming landscape, pretty much everyone knows what it is and probably has a good idea of where it's at and how long it's been out, all that kind of stuff.
So Valve's hardware, it's something that they've always been working on in the background. And I think that they take an approach of just trying to move the industry forward. They're not focused on being the biggest retailer. They're not trying to be the next Nintendo. You know, they haven't made a new real Half-Life game in how long. They released the one for the Index, Portal, Team Fortress 2. They have these huge titles that are super successful, but it's never really been what they're about. When they do release games, it's usually because they're trying to create something new. So, like we saw Half-Life Alyx come out for VR, and that was really, I think, groundbreaking for VR at the time. Also, the Valve Index, which is, I think, by most considered to be kind of the creme de la creme of VR devices. The Steam controller added a bunch of new inputs that we hadn't seen on gamepads before. So that's where we started to see these weird kind of haptic feedback systems built into controllers. Steam Machines and Steam Link, you know, in-home streaming of games. These are all things that really Valve created or were the first to market on in some way. And that is really, I think, their focus is just opening up the doors, creating new possibilities for video games, gaming hardware, and personal computing in general.
And I think with the exception of VR, you had all these things, picked them up at some point or another, right?
I haven't, you know, I've used them at one point or another. Personally, haven't used VR. The Steam Machines and Steam Boxes, those were produced by third parties, and I never personally used one. Those kind of died relatively quickly, I think.
Yeah.
The Steam Link, I did use the software that kind of powered the Steam Link for in-home streaming, and I still use that.
Okay.
And I think that's something that they're still focused on, you know, promoting. It's something that they have built into the Steam Deck as well. So remote in-home streaming, that's basically what the Steam Link was meant to do, just offer that on any TV in your house. Yeah, and obviously with the Steam Deck, it incorporates a lot of the technology behind the Steam controller. So I really like what Valve has done in the past, and I've followed it closely. But I haven't always been, you know, the one to pick it up day one.
Yeah, I know our friend Clinton is a big Steam controller guy. He's been using those for years, and I feel like there's always something broken with it. Like he's always hitting up that refund or that warranty, whatever it is. Yeah,
sure.
Getting new controllers, but like there's a reason he keeps going back for more is because he does really like it because it is a novel idea with the kind of mouse controls like touchpaddy sort of thing,
Right?
In place of like the control sticks, which I think is like a pretty cool thing, and they obviously have implemented that in maybe an improved way, you could say, with the Steam Deck itself.
Yeah. I think their manufacturing, they're really starting to nail it down. Like it's clear that there's been this progression from day one where they were, you know, getting other vendors to produce the Steam machines and just kind of, you know, offering the support for them to do that. Then the Steam Link making it themselves and the Steam controller and then the Valve Index. Like each one of those steps, things have felt a little bit cleaner in terms of build quality. And yeah, I think that really shows in the Steam Deck, which feels like a culmination of all of these things that Valve has done in the past.
So you kind of touched on this when you were kind of in there ordering day one, talking about some of the availability stuff of this console, because as you mentioned, it's been, I guess, over a year now that this thing has been announced and you've been able to order it. And then I guess it was around maybe November of 2021 is when they started shipping them, I think, or October, November,
that sounds
in
right.
that pocket, right?
Yep, that sounds right.
Yeah, so, and since then, like because you were there day one ordering, I assume.
Right.
On the 16th,
I think
it's taken quite a while before you actually got one, right?
I'm in Canada, so I think we kind of got the short end of the stick a little bit. I know people in Europe had it a lot worse in general. I was unfortunate that the Steam store was crashing while I was trying to order, so it took me probably 2 hours from when reservations went live to actually get my order in. And then I was slated for Q3. I think originally Q2, but there was a delay, you know, right at due to the supply chain difficulties that were happening at the start of the year and late last year. So that pushed everything back about 2 to 3 months. And therefore, my order got shipped just at the start of Q3. And yeah, a really quick shipping time. That was nice to see. So I think it took less than a week or roughly 1 week for it to arrive, shipping from Southeast U.S., Illinois, I think, or something like that.
Okay. And then, you know, part of this too is that the Steam Deck has a couple different versions. So Of course, what version do you have? And I don't know, do you want to just quickly outline
Yeah.
like the other ones that are available?
Yeah, let's break it down quickly. So the base model of the Steam Deck, it's a 64 gigabyte model. All models of the Steam Deck come with upgradable storage. The physical unit is identical for all three models. The only change is on the top tier model, which is 512 gigabytes. You have, I believe it's just a slightly faster SSD and an etched glass display, which should reduce glare. Yeah, so the three models, you have a 64 gigabyte model, which is really retailing for around $550 Canadian. Then you have the 256 gigabyte model. I think that one's up to about 650 Canadian or $700 Canadian.
Okay.
And then the 512 gigabyte model, which has that etched glass display, slightly faster SSD, and then you're up to about 800 or 850 Canadian.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like 64. That seems like painfully low to me. And I know
Painfully
you can, like,
low, yeah.
put in other hard drives and such, but like you would just not even be able to like out of the box download many games with that amount.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely have titles installed that are well over that. And, you know, the nice thing is compared to Windows, the installation size of the operating system is very small. So you do have a lot to work with there on the 64 gigabyte if you're just into like ROMs and emulators and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that being said, absolutely, you would want to go to a micro SD card and expand that storage, which is actually quite cost effective. So for somebody thinking about purchasing one, you know, probably your best route is to go with that 64 gigabyte model, get a micro SD card that's 500 gigabytes or a terabyte and put that in there.
Right.
There's a lot of really good information online about which micro SD cards are the fastest and which will perform the best. There is a very big difference between bottom of the line micro SDs and top of the line micro SDs. So it's worth doing a little bit of research before picking one up. Another thing I'll mention is the etched glass display personally. So I have the 512 gigabyte model. It does have the etched glass display. You can also pick those up from third-party retailers, and
Would that be
I've
something
seen
you'd overlay, or would you like have
Yeah.
to open up your Steam Deck and?
Nope,
put it in
it's
there?
a screen protector that has etched glass. So from what I've seen, a couple of them are fairly good quality. It does range, so again, do a little bit of research. I think the Mag Glass ones are one of the more popular brands on Reddit right now.
Okay.
So that's a good option too. And then you do have the added protection of a screen protector, you know, some kind of layer on top of that display. But, you know, I just wanted to have the best possible deck from day one with the etched glass display. To me, it is worth it, just given that I don't want to be able to see myself in my Steam Deck screen and I'm using it a lot of the time. So, yeah, I was happy to go up to the 512 gigabyte.
And sorry, just to confirm, so between the 64 gig and the 256, is there any internal differences, or is it just storage on those two?
I believe it's just storage. Yeah, is the only real difference between the two models.
And then talking a little bit more about the micro SD options, you had a couple notes here. So I don't know, do you have any like recommendations, or what else did you want to touch on with the micro SDs as an option?
Yeah, there's not too much to say other than it does seem to be a really good way to go. Valve is doing more to support it, so a lot of people are using them to kind of hot swap between games. You know, they'll have like 3 titles on one and then another 3 titles on another, kind of treating it like game cartridges for, you know, a Nintendo DS or
Right.
something like that, right? And yeah, it seems to work great. The only thing is you do need to, you know, eject the storage. You're probably familiar with that term on your computer when you have a USB stick plugged in. So they're currently working on adding that to the UI of the Steam Deck, because right now a lot of people are just ejecting the cards without disconnecting them first.
Wait, is it just that it's unintuitive to know where to do that, or they just don't have an option to?
I think it's
eject safely?
unintuitive. Yeah, I think it's unintuitive. I think you may actually have to go into desktop mode right now to properly eject storage. So it's just something that they kind of overlooked, and it's something that a lot of users are using, you know, heavily. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see them already addressing that and saying that they're adding that quickly so that it'll be right in the quick access menu to eject your storage. Yeah, and
That's
definitely
good.
a good option.
One thing, maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit, but I know that there's a lot you can do with like customizing controls and stuff. Is that something you could set up as a custom control? I'm just picturing there's like somewhere you could like hold like down 5 buttons at the same time and then have that as like a safe eject button. That'd be kind of funny.
I'll say if you can think of it, you can do it on the Steam Deck. Whether it's worth your time, that's another question, right? So
Right.
I don't believe there is the nice thing is it has a very nice controller setting menu built in for every single game. You can have a different control profile, and it works very intuitively to customize and change your controller settings. So that's great. But if there isn't an option, for instance, to eject in that menu, then it would be much more difficult. Still possible, but more difficult.
And then the last thing you had in this kind of section as a note was that Gabe of Valve described it like I guess the price points are, they're not going to be turning a profit just from selling the deck alone, which is nothing really new for console manufacturers like the Xboxes and PS5s.
Right.
And I even imagine the Switch, like they're not making a profit on the console itself. And I think it's
Totally.
usually around maybe $50 to $100 is what they're losing on each one. But then, if you're buying, like Xbox wants you to get that Game Pass subscription and make up for it, or PlayStation is selling all their stuff and they're going to take a huge cut because you're buying through the PlayStation Store. And obviously Switch games are very expensive as well and never go down, so you're going to be making their money back that way. But I'm curious, like where the Steam Deck falls in that, because it is a much stronger device than, at least the Switch. I don't know where it would compare with a Series X or a PS5, but I wonder how much you could say they're losing on each Steam Deck purchase, and then obviously comes installed with like the Steam Store and all that stuff. So hopefully they can make it back pretty quickly.
I would be shocked if they're making any money on the 64 gigabyte model. I'm sure they're turning some kind of small profit possibly on the 512 gigabyte model.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you're right that the goal here is to produce value from game sales on Steam. And yeah, just like I know, like you were saying, it's usually a loss leader, the console. And I think of the PlayStation 3, which I'm pretty sure they were net negative at the end of that generation, like substantially in terms of money lost just on consoles. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's true as well here for Valve. But it doesn't really seem like their goal is to make money off the Steam Deck, or even in terms of the eventual web sales that will, the boost in web sales that they'll see from it. This really does feel like it's kind of a change in the industry where it's opening up the door for devices that work cross-platform or across ecosystems. So, personally on my Steam Deck, I'm running games that I have on Epic Game Store. I'm running games that I have on Battle.net. I'm running emulated games. I have all of that on my device, accessible directly from the library. And that's really first of its kind, I think. Of course, there's laptops that can do it, but this is a laptop. This is a personal computer, and that's something that they've really emphasized in the marketing. And it is true that, anything you could do on a traditional computer, you should be able to do on the Steam Deck.
Right. What was I going to touch on there? I forget. I think I was going to mention something, but I guess one thing that's worth throwing out there too is, I'm often playing Steam things on my laptop and then my computer and switching back and forth. And like the cloud storage stuff is great. Like I feel like I've never, like in the last year or two, I don't think I've had any issues with saves crossing over and stuff. So I think that's a good thing too, of if you're picking up a Steam Deck and you want to just pick up from where you left off when you were last playing on PC, like you're probably in good hands, unless like maybe you're playing some smaller game or some game that's not as supported. But I think just in general, like that part of it, switching back and forth, should be pretty painless.
Yeah, that was one of the things that they were focused on too. And I believe one of the updates right from when they launched the Steam Deck was enabling Steam cloud saves as soon as the device goes to sleep. So that way, if, I want to play my game for 30 minutes on the bus and then I turn it off and go inside, already my Steam save should be accessible on my desktop.
Right. Anything in terms of the history availability you want to touch on, or should we get into some of the nitty gritty here of the actual like physical piece of hardware?
Yeah, let's dive into it. I think that's probably a good synopsis of the background on the device.
Yeah, so let's start by talking about just what you see and what you feel before we talk about the stuff that's running on the inside. We already kind of touched on the screen, but I think you have some maybe more details. So let's start there. Anything else in terms of the screen quality that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, sure. We'll start with the screen. So it's a 10 10-point multi-touch touchscreen display that runs at 800 p resolution and 60 hertz. So you can get up to 60 frames per second comfortably on the device. And that really is a big step up from, this device's main competitor, which would be the Nintendo Switch, which runs at, 30 FPS, and I believe it's a 720p display. So it's a little bit better in both regards, but especially in terms of that refresh rate. Personally, I would always take a higher refresh rate over a higher resolution, even to the point I would prefer, 144 hertz at 720p to say, 60 hertz at 1080p. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. It looks great. And when you tweak the settings a bit, you can get really buttery smooth animations in most games, which is nice. Moving away from the screen too. So you have dual joysticks, dual touch pads, and they're both touch sensitive. The nice thing is with the joysticks, they actually do have a little bit of a touch sensitive feature where when you put your finger on either one of the joysticks, you can have different controls enabled. So if I put my hand or my thumb on the right joystick, that can be the trigger to turn on gyro. So if I only want gyro to turn on when I'm aiming, I have my thumb on that right joystick, that is, already included or built into the system and works really flawlessly. So yeah, like I say, it does have gyro, which is great, especially for a handheld device. Accelerometer built in. The buttons all feel fantastic. They're clicky. They're not spongy. Very similar to, I would say, an Xbox controller, an Xbox One controller in terms of the feel of both the joysticks and the buttons.
Right.
And it's fairly lightweight. I think that was one thing that you also noticed. And
yeah, that surprised me when I was holding it. I was like, wow, I don't know why I expected this thing to be like twice or 3 times as heavy as it is. It doesn't feel bad at all, especially if you're holding it in weird ways. Maybe you're in bed, it's above your head or something like that. Like, I don't think you're going to have any issues there. It feels pretty good in that way.
Right. Yeah, totally. It does. And it really has an understated look, which I appreciate. One of the things that has always bothered me is I don't like using gaming devices in public, especially if I was ever at work or something like that. They just look too gamery most of the time. Same with gamer laptops. Like
Sure.
It can just be a little bit obnoxious, but the Steam Deck, it's really professional looking. It's, this matte coat plastic that has a slight shine to it, but really not a whole lot going on outside of that. A lot of people are putting skins and other types of, decorations on it that look great. But out of the box, it just has a very clean presentation, which I appreciate.
I definitely agree with that. And yeah, just to go back, like I when I was holding it and stuff like that, I found the buttons were great as well. For me, it's like a 2 things. Like, one, it's just like the quality of the buttons, like they do feel good, but also the positioning. Like when I first saw it too, the what is it, A, B, X, Y, whatever it is on there. They're like really far to the right side. Like they're almost like falling off the side.
Totally.
But that's so it maybe looks a bit different than what you expect for a controller, when normally it's kind of maybe more centered to the right side of the controller. But it feels great. Like the ergonomics of it are fantastic, especially compared to Switch, which I play a lot of, which is very much like a flat tablet, right? And this, I feel like, has a more ergonomic feel to it. I guess to compare it to the Switch, for anyone who hasn't seen a Steam Deck in person, is definitely wider, but not really much taller. Maybe a little bit, because the controller part of it kind of sticks out a bit more. But it's still it's not too much higher. I guess the screen's maybe a little bit bigger as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just the controller feels much better because the Joy-Cons are also just kind of this flat thing, so they don't really stick like super nicely in your hand. I mean, I'm kind of used to it now as I've had this thing for a few years, but just the feel of the Steam Deck is great, and the ergonomics. Like, I feel like I can hold it for a lot longer without having any tension in my hands in any weird
This
way.
is something that we talked about too when you were here, is with the Switch, the first time I used it, I really didn't enjoy the handheld feel of it, and I almost use it exclusively in docked mode for that reason. I don't love the display quality. I don't really love the feel of the Joy-Cons. So moving over to the Steam Deck, as soon as I picked it up, it really felt natural to me, coming from using Xbox One controllers on my PC. So yeah, if you're used to that, you'll probably be satisfied with the Steam Deck's hand feel.
Yeah, and I also gotta commend the touchpad too, or I guess there's two of them, right? One on
Yeah,
each side, and I thought those were fantastic. Like they're I don't know how long, maybe like a inch and a half by inch and a half. Like they're kind of square. And yeah, I just thought they felt great. Like even for playing first person games, I mean, maybe more for Aperture Desk Job, it felt a bit better than when I was playing like the shooter game. What was that? Journey to the Savage Planet. That
right.
took some more getting used to. But I was like, I feel like within a few hours I could get used to this and comfortably play like just first person action game with these touchpads alone, not even using the sticks. And then obviously for cruising around the UI or when you're in desktop mode, that kind of stuff, touchpad
Yeah,
is nice for
100%.
that. But I love those touchpads, and now it's like, damn, I want that on my Xbox controller too because it does feel great.
I agree. Yeah, big fan of that. And it is nice to have a control system that moves fluidly between games and, say, web browsing or
Hmm.
working in the desktop mode. I really like the Steam Deck from kind of a productivity perspective, too. The fact that you can use it as a desktop on
Yeah.
the go and having those touchpads there, yeah, they work great for that.
And then touch on the battery life a bit. Now that you've had it for a few weeks here, tell me about the battery life.
Yeah, this is a tough one because depending on what you're doing, the battery life is going to vary
Yeah.
drastically. I mean, very similar to a cell phone, right? Where if you're playing a
Hmm.
game on a cell phone, odds are you're going to kill the battery. But if you're just, say, browsing, Chrome, you're not going to have as much issue. Um, that's very true here as well. In my experience, I'm netting on average about 4 to 5 hours in most of the games that I play at the settings that I play at.
Hmm.
Uh, to give you an idea, I'm mostly playing titles that are lighter in terms of graphical quality and demanding hardware,
Hmm.
and I'm happy about that because it gives me a reason to play those games. A lot of these games that I'm playing on the Steam Deck are ones that I've had for a very long time, but when I sit down at my gaming PC, I'm probably going to load up a bigger AAA title, which is what I want to sink into or play with my
Hmm.
friends. I probably don't want to play, say, Stardew Valley or something of
Sure.
that level when I could play that on a much less powerful system on the go. And that's
Hmm.
really kind of the area that I think the Steam Deck hits it perfectly. It can play those AAA titles. For instance, I was running Monster Hunter World. I played Elden Ring on this, and it works great. However, where it feels most at home and most natural is when you're playing, those titles that are a little bit simpler in terms of graphical quality.
Hmm. Anything else on the hardware part of this before we dig into the insides?
Yeah, I didn't mention it does also have two paddles on the rear of the device.
Right. Right.
So that's nice. Just again, offering you more options in terms of control depending on the title that you're playing. You can bind those to any function you want. And they also feel pretty natural. They rest kind of right where your ring and pinky fingers would naturally rest on the back of the device.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I thought those were a bit awkward at first because I was trying to like press them in, but then you told me, oh, you should just kind of like pull them into your controller as the button kind of rounds. It's like a banana shape, so to
Yeah,
speak.
it's kind of a
And
silly
it
thing.
works so much better when you do that. So for anyone who's like checking this out, like, don't do what I did. Even
Yeah,
though
it's
to me that felt like intuitive, but I guess I'm just not used to a controller that has a button that rolls around the side of it that you're kind of pulling into.
I did the exact same thing when I got the device, and you're right. It's if you want to use them, push into the back of the device rather than squeezing them. You'll
Hmm.
probably have a better time. They're a lot softer when you're
Yeah,
pushing them. So
cool. Okay, let's take our first ad break, then we'll come back and then we'll dig into the insides of this thing.
right on.
All right, we are back. So we talked about the outside of this thing, the hardware. Let's talk about the inside, the UI, the software, and all that. And I'm really glad I have you here because I feel like I don't know. I'm going to say 95, if not even higher, percentage of people that have been using the Steam Deck or other reviews out there. There are probably people that don't use Linux, but you've used Linux for many many years. And that's what this thing comes kind of pre-downloaded with. So I think you're just going to be set up for a lot more success because you know everything about that operating system. So
Yeah.
let's dig into it and maybe talk about the Linux aspect of it first.
Yeah, happy to. You're right. I'm a big fan of Linux. I've been using it on my systems for years. probably back in, I think it was around 2016, I tried to set up gaming on Linux and it just wasn't there yet. So I still kind of kept Windows around for my games. But for I think the past 3 years now, or maybe even 4 years, I've been full time using Linux for everything and really happy with it. And yeah, so the Steam Deck is running a customized version. It has its own operating system that's designed by Valve called Steam OS. This is the third version, or version 3.0 of Steam OS,
Okay.
and it really feels natural in terms of a handheld device operating system. It has that kind of grid layout for you to scroll through your games and see everything that's pre-installed. So this, you likely wouldn't even know that this is running Linux if you never used the desktop mode, or never did any research into how it's working behind the scenes. Yeah. And given that this is really a personal computer, it's able to do anything a desktop computer can do. You can install any of the software pretty much that you'd expect to be able to install on your computer directly onto the Steam Deck.
And I found too, like the desktop mode, and is it called gaming mode? What's the other?
Gaming mode, I think, is what they call it.
It's very quick to switch between the two, and like very intuitive. It doesn't feel like, okay, I got to reboot the computer to go to like this different mode. It's really quite quick to go between them, which I found pretty convenient.
Yeah, it works well. It's super fast. Basically, it's just launching the Steam Big Picture when you go into gaming mode, and then it's closing that or minimizing it or whatever in the background when you go to desktop mode. So yeah, it's quick to switch between the two. And myself being really a power user of the Steam Deck, I do switch between the two quite frequently just to either install software, or especially when I first got the device, setting up all of the different software that I personally wanted to use it for. It's really a tinkerer's dream, this device. And if you're not a tinkerer, I'm sure you'll still be satisfied with the fact that you can play all of your Steam games, or I should, temper that, most of your Steam games on the go. However, for somebody who is more of a power user, you can do a whole lot more with this device, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I really did not mess around too much with desktop mode. I just scrolled around a little bit, clicked on a couple things. It all felt pretty straightforward to me, but yeah, I wasn't doing any more of that. I was not the tinkerer. I was just, checking stuff out. So you mentioned, some of your games, most of your games hopefully are playable, but I think they have a pretty handy way of telling you whether or not something is going to work. So yeah, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. Yeah, when you go to your library on the Steam Deck, there's going to be a little icon on all of your games that shows you what the status of it is, whether it's verified for the deck, playable on the deck, unverified, or unplayable. And they're still working on testing more titles and, of course, making more titles playable on the deck. A lot of times the difference between a title being playable and unplayable is something as small as the in-game text being, maybe a little bit tiny on the display because it only runs at 800p. So it can be things that are an issue on all devices, not just necessarily the Steam Deck and Linux. Other issues or other games that you might want to play could simply not be playable, either due to not supporting anti-cheat on Linux. A lot of titles do now, but there are still some that don't. That could be a problem if you're wanting to play more of the competitive FPS games. However, for the most part, Steam is really doing a great job of increasing support and compatibility for titles. Every week, there's a new list of titles that are playable on the deck, and I think that's really great for people who are, watching closely for their favorite games to be made playable.
Yeah, and I think the Steam Deck seems to be a pretty big success, I at least comparatively to Valve's other attempts at hardware, and I think the support will be there for many years. So I expect for at least the big AAA games, the people who are able to, get the dev kits and things like that. I think it will get better and better as games are coming out.
Totally.
Hopefully day one, they can say that, put that in their trailer and stuff like that, ready to play on the Steam Deck. And right now, maybe the number of people who have access to that, maybe it's not a huge deal, but I think it will become a pretty big deal. And maybe we don't want to go too deep into like the
No,
future
that's
of this thing,
good
'cause we're
though.
going to talk about that later, but it is something that they're working on for sure. And I guess, probably worth mentioning too, that if something is like, says it's unplayable or unverified, things like that, you can still check it out. You can still try it, and maybe you can mess around with the settings and get it to work enough for you, depending on what game it is. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that AAA level support will be pretty good in the coming years.
Already, I would say it's pretty good. For me personally, basically every title I want to play is playable on the Steam Deck. There's probably a couple that I, haven't been able to play. Nothing's coming to mind personally. I think Apex Legends was an issue for quite a while due to anti-cheat, but I believe even that one's now playable. I think Fortnite is one of those games that isn't playable and probably won't be anytime soon. So it does depend, and sometimes the deciding factor on a game just not reaching playability is due to the developers not wanting to support anti-cheat or not wanting to open the doors to Linux users, which Valve has really gone out of their way to make simplistic and straightforward now.
Right.
So for most titles, again, it is playable. If you want to see which games are and are not playable and you don't already have a Steam Deck to kind of check on the device, there's two websites that you can go to. Probably the best website for this is called protondb.com. And that is really kind of the first source for user reports on whether games are working, how well they're working, and whether you need to make any kind of tweaks or changes to get them working. But for me personally, haven't had to tweak any games, haven't had to go out of my way to make stuff work. And I've really been impressed over the past year just how much progress has been made in terms of running Windows games on Linux computers and devices. You really don't take a performance hit. In the rare occasion, you'll actually gain a little bit of performance. Some games are a little bit worse, but in general, I think it falls around, kind of a 10% performance, margin going between the two operating systems.
Right. And I don't know if this is getting too in the weeds of it, but like you can install Windows on this thing if you want to, right?
Yeah, I would really say it's not a good idea. Like I'll be the one to say don't do it for sure. I wouldn't advise it at all. There's really nothing to gain by doing it. You will impact the performance negatively, and you're more likely to run into hardware issues and just general user experience problems using Windows on this device. If you're someone who's hesitant or really is happy with Windows and wants to continue using it, give it a shot before you go that far, because the times where you're shooting yourself in the foot by using the built-in operating system are few and far between.
And do you know then if, let's say you do install Windows and then you got Steam up there and you're checking games, like are those playable? Those indicators, are those still going to be accurate? Do they show them still? Like, is it like does each game like check whether or not you're running Windows?
I don't
Or the
know.
SteamOS before
It's
it
a
runs it?
very small number of users that would choose to install Windows on the
Yeah.
Steam Deck. So I really doubt they're going to do anything to support it. I don't know what happens when you launch Steam on a Windows device or a Windows Steam Deck.
Yeah.
I would expect it would just work the same as it would on a laptop. I know it does work. You can do it.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be the best experience for the end user. And the other thing to note here is like you're not limited to Steam on the Steam Deck. So
Definitely.
just if you're thinking, oh, I need to go to Windows because I want to run my Epic games, or I want to run something else that's outside, like say Xbox Game Pass games. Those are actually supported on the Steam Deck as well. You do have to go through a few extra steps to get them running, but once you do those, they'll run flawlessly and they'll be accessible from directly on your home screen. So personally, I have a couple of games from the Epic Game Store. Into the Breach is one that are right there on my home screen. I hit launch and it works exactly the same as my Steam games. Same goes if you want to run Xbox Game Pass. Microsoft has actually announced that they're in some ways supporting the Steam Deck, and they have their own guide on how to get xCloud running on the Steam Deck. So if you are, an avid user of the Xbox Game Pass, definitely give that a shot or take a look at that.
Sounds good. Yeah, I guess maybe going back to some other basic stuff there. The quick access menu is pretty good. Like obviously quick access, so you just kind of hit one button and you're right there using it. But that seems like a pretty good way to quickly change some things on the fly. From
Yeah.
the basics such as like a brightness, audio, checking your notifications, that kind of thing. But then also like modifying games or settings and your upscalers, that kind of stuff. So it seems like you can do a lot of stuff just very quickly in terms of if a game says playable, but you boot it up and it doesn't feel quite right. It seems like you can very quickly do a lot of
Absolutely.
things to try and like optimize that
Yeah, you
experience.
could impose a frame rate limiter, so you can drop it to 30 FPS and cap it
Right.
there, or put it at 60 or unlimited. You can also turn on a little heads-up display that will show you exactly how the performance
Hmm.
is inside of the game. So either showing you just the FPS or also showing you, battery usage and
Yeah,
how
it's
fast the
very
graphics
detailed if
card.
you want it to be. Yeah.
Exactly. So for those, kind of homebrew users who want to customize the device and really eke out as much performance as they want, you can do that all from the quick access menu. You can even overclock/underclock the performance of the graphics card in the unit right from the quick access menu. So that's really cool. And it also, one of the perks of this running Linux and being so open is that the community is able to create their own solutions and make those
Mm.
available to other users. So, one example of that, you can install plugins that will automatically kind of show you additional options in your quick access menu. So, even if Valve hasn't put it in there, you can install a plugin that will do it as well. And you're not going to break the device doing it. So, that's really nice to see as well.
Hmm. And you also showed me too that there is kind of a quick way you can check for, I guess, community-made control schemes for certain games, just to make them run that much more, like
Yes.
play them in the best way possible. So I'm sure for more popular games, you'll have multiple that you can choose from right from the get-go. Other ones, I know a couple we checked didn't have any in there.
Right.
But some of those games might just run perfectly without needing to do anything, which is
Some of
maybe
the
why
older
someone didn't
titles,
make them.
exactly. Some of the older titles won't have them, just because maybe they're not as frequently played nowadays. But
Hmm.
definitely with the newer titles, what I've noticed is that either you'll have an official kind of controller scheme, which is supplied, I think, just by the developers of the title. So, for instance, Rocket League has its own pre-installed official controller scheme, but then you can just switch over to the next tab and see all the community controller schemes and kind of pick and choose what you think is going to be the best one for your experience, whether that's using the touchpad so that you're getting more of a mouse feel in shooters, or if you want to have the paddles to control shifting in a racing game. Those are usually going to be accessible right there in the community templates without you having to do anything, which is amazing to see. Valve is very clearly putting the power in the hands of the users and opening the door for the community to create solutions to challenges or problems, or make it their own device however they see fit, which is so nice to see coming from really locked down handhelds in the past.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, this is the kind of case with anything, but just the amount of like YouTube channels that exist or the Reddits, like things like this. There's a lot of people who are, I don't know, giving all sorts of suggestions or download this thing, check this thing out, or buy this like hardware add-on. Like I don't know, I feel like that community aspect of it too is pretty big. You had a note here about the big X factor is the community of creators and developers using and working on the Steam Deck. Is that kind of what you're touching on there, or do you want to
Yeah,
add anything on detailed
for
there?
sure. I think this is probably the biggest thing with moving to Linux and offering all of this in an open source environment where users are able to change the device or, tweak the system's files however they really want to. It's
Sure.
it's totally a computer, whereas we're so used to, if you wanted to homebrew Switch or a PlayStation in the past, you had to go through a very convoluted process to essentially hack the device, void your warranty, and
Hmm.
then hope that you don't brick the device in the process.
Yeah.
So it's so amazing to see a device where they're not just saying you can do this, they're in some ways encouraging users to do this and, making it so simple for the less technical users to benefit from those community creations. So just to give you one example, a lot of people are going to run emulators on the Steam Deck. It's just kind of
Hmm.
a natural fit for the device. It's probably one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful handheld devices available today. So perfect for if you want to emulate older consoles. One of the tools available to you is called EmuDeck, which was just created by the community. So you can just look up EmuDeck, EMU Deck, on Google and you'll find it. All you do, you download the script, you run the script, and boom, you have all of your emulator software
Hmm.
installed. So you can access and load games into any of those emulators. Of course, it doesn't give you the games. It doesn't give you the firmware for all of the devices
Yeah.
to run. That's on the end user to do, and they're not breaking any copyright laws that way. However, just having all of that set up in kind of a four-step process is so nice. And personally, as somebody who really hasn't gotten into emulators since I was younger, it was just a great experience to not have to go and do all this research on how things work. I could just install a script, run it, and have all that right out the gate with all the perfect settings available to me.
That's cool. You
Yeah.
also had some other names of different softwares here that I guess will. You mentioned EmuDeck, but there's some other ones here.
Sure.
You wanna shout those
Yeah,
out by name?
if you have a Steam Deck, these will probably be interesting to you. So I'll just quickly rattle these off. They're worth checking out. So let me just see here in my notes. Yeah, so the first one is the Heroic Games Launcher. That's most of the software is going to be downloadable in desktop mode by then opening up the Discover store, which is where you're able to add new software. It's basically the app store of the Linux
Right.
desktop environment, which is called KDE. So once you're inside of the Discover store in desktop mode, you can look up Heroic. And Heroic is an implementation of the Epic Games Store on Linux. So this is how you can sign into your Epic Games Store account, download all your games, and run them naturally on the device. Very easy and straightforward to get set up. Then, if you want those games to be accessible from the gaming mode home screen or library, there's another piece of software, very straightforward, called Boiler. So that's Boiler, and it's available on GitHub. So you might need to look up Boiler GitHub. I don't think, actually, sorry, I take that back. It is available on the Discover store as well. So you don't have to download it from GitHub anymore. A lot of this software is being developed so actively, and everything is so new that it's not all available on the built-in app store yet, but most of it is already. Things move so quickly and people are so passionate. So anyhow, Boiler just allows you to take all of your titles that you've installed into your games launchers. So let's say you have Battle.net or the Heroic Games Launcher installed. You can use Boiler and it'll automatically detect those games, load them into your library, and give them their cover art and everything else so that you don't have to go into desktop mode. You shouldn't be launching games from desktop mode. You should only launch games from gaming mode. In desktop mode, they actually do reduce the performance of the device because it's not expected that you'll be running intensive software necessarily. I believe there are ways around that, but you shouldn't need to use those. So just use something like Boiler so that you're able to access those games from gaming mode. Those are, two of the pieces of software that I think everyone can benefit from. There is, of course, other creations of the community. Go ahead and check them out either on Reddit or go to the Steam Deck Discord to find some of those cooler pieces of software. Really, if you can run it on your computer, odds are you can run it on your Steam Deck. So I can be talking to my friends on Discord on my Steam Deck while playing my games, no problem. And, it's really straightforward to do all this stuff if you're slightly technically inclined. If you're afraid of bricking the device, go slow, but odds are you won't be able to anyhow. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think even Xbox has implemented Discord now, or they're working on it. I think there was an announcement of that recently, and then I think PlayStation already has that. So I feel like Discord now, you're kind of well connected everywhere except for Switch, of course.
Naturally.
They don't even have Netflix on there. And then you also had a note here about xCloud, which is kind of in some way works through the Steam Deck. So I'm particularly curious about that one because to me, I think a big thing with the Steam Deck would be like I want to access my stuff on Game Pass and be able to play that stuff. So how's xCloud doing?
Right, yeah. So all you need to do is look up xCloud Gaming with Steam Deck on Google, and you'll end up on a Microsoft support page, which is going to walk you through exactly how to get it running on your Steam Deck. Essentially, what you're doing is installing the Microsoft Edge browser again through, I believe it's just through the Discover store. Once you've done that, you just have to tweak a few settings to get xCloud running through the web browser, and it gives you all of that information right there. It'll also tell you how to put a shortcut to it for gaming mode, how to give it a proper piece of artwork so that it's not just blank in your library, all that good stuff. So pretty straightforward. It'll probably take you 30 minutes to an hour to get it running, but the fact that you can run it, and I mean, this is Microsoft we're talking about, who is in direct competition in some ways with Linux, despite what they'll say about it. But it's just great to see that they are open to supporting other devices running their software.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, right? Is like Xbox really has no intention of making their PSP, their Switch, anything like that. They just want to able to like stream things through your phone, and now Steam Deck is another great platform for that to be widely accepted.
Totally.
So I think they'll do everything in their power to make it easier for more people to have a Game Pass subscription. So I think that sounds
totally
good there.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I still think we should touch on. Just going back to games and support for the Steam Deck. One thing that's important, I think, is when you go to protondb.com, what you'll find is a list of how many games are playable, what games are playable, and one of the statistics that they track is kind of what percentage of the top games are playable. So I just pulled these numbers yesterday to give the community an idea of what is playable on Linux. So of the top 1,000 games on Steam, 234 are rated platinum, which means, will run fantastic on Linux. 437 are rated gold, which means, again, that they'll run great. There shouldn't be any surprises. 155 are rated silver. So at that point, you're probably still running well. You might, again, run into those little playability issues in terms of text being too small or maybe slight performance degradation compared to Windows. 31 are rated bronze, which means it works, but it's probably not great. And 44 are quote unquote borked. So of the top 1,000 games available on Steam today, only 44 don't work on Linux. They also track the numbers for whether they have been deck verified, which means that it works on the deck, which has very specific hardware, and because of that can also run into certain incompatibilities, usually more easily worked around. So one thing I just want to emphasize here is, although the numbers are somewhat lower, odds are a similar number of the games are playable and may just require some tweaks or are still, being updated by the developers. Right. So those numbers, deck verified games, 148 are verified, 260 are playable, and 191 are currently unsupported, which doesn't necessarily mean that they won't run, but does mean that they aren't verified or haven't been tested or otherwise are not confirmed yet to work on the Steam Deck.
So what is the difference then? Because that does not equal up to 1,000. So what are we missing there?
Those are, I think, the titles that they Valve themselves have actually tested. So for something to be deck verified, they actually have play testers go in, launch the title, and run through kind of a checklist of, does this work, does that work? And most of the time that is great and is able to give them clear indication of whether the title works or not. There have been a couple instances where a title was listed as playable or verified, but there was some game-breaking bug later in the title that they weren't aware of. So users are able to report those directly to Steam from the Steam Deck. It doesn't happen often, but naturally that is something to be aware of.
Gotcha. Should we talk about, I guess, just getting more to some of the more nitty-gritty stuff of visual quality, frame rate of games, things like that. So, yeah, the Upscaler, but I don't remember the name of, but you, of course, know this. So break this down, because this is, like, pretty much the reason why you're able to run, like, these big AAA games is because of some of this technology they have here.
Yeah, this is so awesome, and people didn't even know that this was going to be a thing or going to work or how it was going to work until the Steam Deck was showing up in people's hands. So it was really exciting. What it's called, it's an upscaler called AMD FSR. So the processor GPU inside the system is made by AMD, and one of the pieces of software AMD is working on is an upscaler, which means when you're running at a resolution below what the display is capable of, it will upscale that picture quality to make it look very similar to as if it were running at the full resolution, but without using nearly as much performance, power, graphic, resources. And I think this is really kind of the ace in the hole for Steam Deck in the handheld market. This is a new version of FSR 2.0, and I'm personally pretty shocked by how well it works. So if you're wanting to try this out, what you do is you load up a title, you go to your options, and you change your resolution from, by default, it'll probably be the full resolution of the Steam Deck, which is 800p. Reduce that down to something like 700p, or personally, I go all the way down to 540p, and then open up your quick access menu, turn on AMD FSR, and set the sharpness to 5. Personally, that's what I use. It's the highest setting available. So really quick and easy to get it working. Again, you just go into your quick settings to reach the FSR option, which is in performance. Sorry, I'm just opening it up here. It's under a scaling filter, which is a slider, and on the far right side is FSR. So just turn it over to FSR and increase the sharpness to 5. When I've done that in games, I see a very, I would say, unnoticeable, but I know I would, get my hand slapped for saying that, drop in picture quality. But my performance shoots up by somewhere around 30 to 40% in general, and the amount of battery usage drops substantially. So that means I can go from playing Elden Ring for 1 hour, 1.5 hours on high graphic settings at 30 FPS to instead getting more like, 2 to 3 hours, and the fan of the Steam Deck isn't blaring while I'm doing it, right? So yeah, it's really a great
frame
feature.
Rate too, probably like up to 40 or 50. I think when we were messing around with stuff
For Elden Ring specifically, yeah, that was our experience. Was without FSR at high graphic settings, we were getting about 30 FPS, and then when we turned on FSR, dropped the resolution, we were hitting more like, I think it was 45 FPS roughly. And we didn't extensively test that or anything, but just to give you a rough idea of what the deck is capable of. And I think it works great. I think FSR does a great job of maintaining picture quality while dropping graphics usage. So definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it's pretty excellent software, and that's like everyone who's talking about the Switch Pro and what that's going to mean. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it's definitely going to be some sort of upscale technology. I think that's kind of in the news right now. A lot of that's happening, so it's cool that the Steam Deck has it and it works pretty well. Looking through this topic, our visual quality frame rate kind of subheader here, is there anything else? I feel like we've talked about some of this stuff in passing already, but anything else in this category you want to touch on?
I think that's pretty good. The last thing I'd like to say too is just that the display itself can get very dim, which is a great thing. So that, naturally it can get quite bright, so it works fine in direct light conditions. But when I'm playing the Steam Deck in bed, I don't want my eyes to be burned by how bright it is. It has a night mode that can be quickly turned on and off in the quick access menu, so that'll, reduce the blue light. However, you can also just drop the brightness to low, and it gets so dim that
really low.
like amazingly low. And I say that in the absolute best way. Out of any device I've used, tablet, phone, whatever, OLED displays even, this display gets much dimmer, which is great for when you're using the device in low light conditions.
Yeah. Protect those eyes, even in mid daylight. My laptop is on like the lowest brightness. You can't see a thing, but it's like, you gotta do what you gotta do so I can look at these screens for many more decades.
Right.
Okay, with that, then let's take, I presume, our last ad break here. Let's take another break, and we have a few more topics on hand here. Okay, we are back. This is a review, so we got to talk about the bad stuff, the issues, bugs, glitches, that sort of thing. So let's dig into that. One, right off the hop, is you've had some issues with the Wi-Fi connectivity. So, and it's kind of a weird one too, right? So let's talk about that. Describe the issue that you've been having.
Totally. Yeah. This was probably the only real frustration I've had with my Steam Deck is right from day one. my Wi-Fi on both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz would just cut out while I was downloading any kind of content. So if I'm browsing the web or if I'm downloading a game, every minute or two, it would cut out for maybe 10 seconds or 20 seconds. It was enough for it to kind of flag to Steam that I'm not connected, so I wouldn't be able to see who was online. Sometimes it would take longer when I boot the device for it to log into Steam, which means I can't actually use the device for, a minute or whatever if it's trying to connect. So it's super annoying, and this was something a lot of other people were experiencing. When I say a lot of other people, I mean this was probably limited to something like 1% of all users. It seems like it was an issue with the device driver, so it's using a Realtek Wi-Fi chip internally, and it needs its own Linux driver, which Realtek is supposed to have done a good job of testing, and it seems like they really didn't. So with certain routers, this chip loses connection for a certain period of time. It also was possibly a power management issue under Linux. So Valve released kind of two updates. The first one offered in the developer options that you can enable to disable power management for the Wi-Fi chip. For most users, that seemed to resolve the problem. So it was great to see them release kind of a solution or a catch-all solution for users within a very short period of time. Myself, it didn't work. I'm using a Netgear router. The issue still persisted. Now, I've had the device for about 3 weeks. I reported my experience in the bug reports thread, and I'm happy to report that today I decided to switch from the beta update channel to the preview channel, and boom, my Wi-Fi is now working flawlessly. Oh, nice. I tested it somewhat extensively this morning just to make sure. It seems to be working perfectly fine. That's on both awesome. 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. I've already, kind of posted an update in the bug report on Steam, so I'm sure Valve's engineers have been working hard on this for quite some time and have hopefully now found the ace in the hole or the fix for all users. I don't know for certain that this is going to solve it for absolutely everyone, but my hope is that now it is fixed for everyone, or at least once the preview update comes to the beta and stable update branches, depending on what you're on. So if you want to check what version of the operating system and client you're on, just press the Steam button, go down to your settings, and then when you go to the system tab, you'll see an option for beta participation where you can switch between stable, beta, and preview. So like I said, I've now switched to the preview channel temporarily while I wait for this update to come down to the beta channel, at which point I'll switch back to beta just to avoid possible other problems that can happen as the preview channel is being updated. I'm guessing daily. It's a staging channel. So
okay. You mentioned something there I was a bit concerned, I was going to say concerned, confused about. You said that if it the Wi-Fi wasn't working, that you wouldn't be able to boot it at all and do anything with it.
Yeah, so when you first turn on...
So if you don't have access to internet, I'd imagine you can obviously still play things on the go.
Exactly. Right? You can still play in offline mode. The device is just going to try to log in first, so you kind of have to wait for it to go through this handshake with the Steam servers. Right. Yeah, that's the frustration for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'm glad that that's resolved, because that was your biggest issue, I think, when we were talking a couple weeks ago.
Absolutely, yeah. The funny thing is, it was still working for online games. So I could play Rocket League, and I wasn't disconnecting. Thing, right? It was super bizarre. So I think what was happening is it was just the download speed was dropping to like kilobytes per second as opposed to, 20 megabits per second. So still enough for gaming, and I still have a low latency, but not enough for it to actually download any data or photos, video, that kind of content.
We also had here that it does not support all games, and it probably won't for a while. I think we've kind of covered this, that you're probably good on most of your games, but I mean, the reality of the situation is there is never going to be a time when every single game works on the Steam Deck. But as time goes on, more and more and more of the ones that are relevant to most people are going to be covered. And most people listen to this, you can probably access most of your games that you have on Steam already. So that's a good thing there. And then maybe just touch on some of the hardware-specific things. There's one issue you've had, and then some other ones that I guess other people online have had.
Yeah, sorry, which... Are you talking about the device itself?
I'm thinking about your controller, your like
Right,
joystick
right.
thing that you mentioned.
Yeah, totally. So on my left joystick, I think this is just the reality of them. This is their first time producing a handheld device. They're not like
Mm-hmm.
Nintendo or Sony who have had, decades of building handheld devices to nail down their manufacturing processes. Uh, Again, like a very small number of users, I've also had this problem where my left joystick is very slightly rubbing against the case exterior. So, the joystick is mounted inside of the case. When I move it to its farthest possible the edge of its range, it's touching or rubbing against the case there, and that's starting to rub away the paint, and it also just kind of feels a little bit gritty. So I mentioned this to you. What I'll probably do, they are offering RMAs for issues like this, which is awesome to see. I know Nintendo Switch had a lot of issues with Joy-Con drift and stuff
Oh
like
god,
that.
yeah. Big
Yeah,
problem.
it seems like Valve is being pretty good so far about RMAing really any issues that the community has noticed with their Steam Decks. There's been other minor things like I saw one or two posts on the Reddit, which I follow pretty closely, where just the paint had been kind of tinted on one of the grips a
Mm,
little bit, like not massively, just it was a little bit lighter where the kind of the palm rest is.
okay.
That's another issue that a couple of people have had where
Like
they
it came
are
shipped that way, or like because their hand
right.
was on it and stuff. What was the?
No, it just came shipped that way. So
Okay.
I think it's just something to do with the machines, in the actual factory, or, I know literally nothing about modern manufacturing processes, so I'm not going to
Sure.
pretend to know what the problem is. But yeah, just the fact that Valve is being quick to respond on these things is awesome to see.
Right, and then I think the last thing was just a minor software glitch that you've been having.
Yeah, this one
What is
also
that?
seems to be resolved now. Every
Okay.
15, 20 minutes, you would get a notification saying claim your Steam Deck rewards. So when you get a Steam Deck or purchase it, you get a couple of like Steam account features, one
Mm-hmm.
of which is like a new background, a new avatar for your Steam profile. You have to claim those in the user interface, and this notification would just kind of keep popping up every 20 minutes to an hour or whatever. So little kind of user interface glitches, I think, are still to be expected. We're still in the early days of the Steam Deck, which I
Mm-hmm.
expect to be supported for a very long time. So yeah, I would say don't be surprised if you run into little things here and there. But overall, my experience with the Steam Deck has been pretty issue free. Even with that Wi-Fi issue, I was still downloading my emulators, my games, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was working just fine. So
Right.
yeah, good
Nice.
experience overall.
Let's talk about a couple of the games that you've been playing on it, and then we got to start with Aperture Desktop, which for anyone who doesn't know, this is a game set within the Portal universe, I guess you could say, and it's pretty much just a 20 to 30 minute long experience that lets you use like all the features of this, or I shouldn't say all the features, but it does maybe a good checklist of here's what the Steam Deck is capable of in terms of those back paddles you were talking about, using all the buttons and the touchpads in different ways, the touch screen. It'll ask you to use the microphone at one point. You really get a good feel of the gyro and how that works in it. Gets you to take a screenshot, that kind of stuff. So it's just a good thing to run through when you first get your Steam Deck, maybe to learn all the buttons, figure out how it all works. But at the same time, like it's a fun game. Like it's very funny. The characters are great. It's just fun gameplay. So like I said, it's pretty short. But I'm really glad that I got to play through Aperture Desk Job, and it's nice too because I was at your place for a couple hours, and in that
Yeah.
time I was able to play through the whole thing. And yeah, I think it's really fun, and I hope more. I guess PS5 kind of did this too with their Astro's Playroom, or I forget if that's what I think it was called something else. Maybe that's what it was called, but essentially it was just like showing off the PS5 controller and what it was capable of that came shipped with the console. And I think that they kind of did the same thing here, although it's not downloaded on the console at launch, right? You have
Right.
to first
It
do
it
it,
does
but
show up as soon as you boot into the device as like an option. It's added to your
yeah,
Steam
it is
library for
free.
you to
Obviously, we
install.
should mention that.
Exactly, and it's free. And yeah, you're right. It's really cute. It's clear that the team at Valve is passionate about the Steam Deck, and like there was a lot of really good humor and like a kind of cutesy little story packed into Aperture Desktop, which was so cool. You know, I didn't know what to expect from Aperture Desktop. I went into it pretty blind. But yeah, it's a short little playthrough set in kind of the typical Portal universe. And it walks you through each one of the different controls, you know, the dual touchpads, the paddles, the gyroscope, all that stuff, just that you're aware of what you can do. And yeah, definitely worth checking out when you first boot up the device. And a nice surprise, I think, for the end user if they're not aware of it being available.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think you can still download it on just a regular desktop, and I wonder if it like
Yeah.
realizes that and then changes a couple things, because there's a couple things that would not be possible
Sure.
in terms of like, I don't know, maybe if I was playing on my desktop and have a microphone plugged in, or like the gyro, like what does it do for that part? So
Yeah.
it's funny because I was going to check it out before the end of the year just to like see what it was all about, but I'm glad I didn't check it out earlier because obviously playing it with the Steam Deck is the way to go. And yeah, like I said, I assume you can download it on a desktop, but I don't even know if you could actually beat it.
Yeah, I couldn't say either way. And it's just kind of an on rails, somewhat inconsequential storyline. So it's not like you're really missing out if you don't get to play Aperture Desktop, I don't think. But yeah, it's definitely fun and straightforward, and a great introduction to a new device. You know, it feels pretty special to launch that for the first time and get to feel all the different controls.
And while we're here, let's go on a bit of a tangent and talk about some of the games we've been playing. I don't think I have anything to bring up today, but I'm curious to hear just a couple things you've been playing on the Steam Deck and some games you want to shout out.
Sure, yeah. While I was bedridden, you know, I decided to download a few titles that I haven't played, but maybe had in my library and was just waiting to check out. So the first one was Vampire Survivors, which was, I think, the maybe not the best title, but definitely the most addictive title you could install on the Steam Deck day one.
You could probably get some good battery life on that one.
You get some fantastic
20
battery
hours,
life.
yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And just so much fun. I was sucked into that game for probably 20 hours. Beat it like, I don't know, 30 or 40 times, and have almost cleared all the achievements in that time. So it's great. They're still launching updates to that. I know the 0.9 update just came out. They're still in early access. And that means that the 1.0 update should be kind of around the corner. So if you've been waiting to check out Vampire Survivors, I was one of the skeptics. I figured it would just be, you know, like a mobile game, like a pretty straightforward, basic, what's it called? Like Galaga or whatever, you know, like, and really it's a lot more than that. I think it's really in a class of its own. Very fun.
Yeah, I've been playing that one too. It is, I mean, it's like $5, but you can also play it through Game Pass. That's where I've been checking it out. And yeah, it is just like a very simple and kind of addictive game in a way. And yeah, I'm still playing it. I try not to play too much. I try to like, okay, I'll do a 2 or 3 runs a day. Like I don't want to let myself do more than that. Or else I'll just sit there for 5 hours straight.
Oh yeah, it definitely got in the way of my work schedule.
Yeah, definitely.
Other games that I've been playing. So I just started Death's Door today, which came out last year, and super impressed with that game. The animations are beautiful. The art style is great. You know, it's oozing with From Software's signature tone, and it has references to the game all throughout, like very clear and direct references, which are fun, but in a much more cutesy world. So, you know, it's kind of like Hollow Knight meets Dark Souls, which it already is similar enough, but
bit of a
or
top-down
Bastion.
Zelda in terms of like structure, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like Bastion, or you know, any kind of isometric action game. Really fun, good controls, perfect for the Steam Deck, I'd say. You know, there's some games that incorporate gyro. I am using emulators to play a lot of games on the Steam Deck. A lot of games that I wouldn't be able to play otherwise, just not due to not having hardware. So it's great to see that the gyro works through emulators as well. And so, yeah, a lot of my time has just been spent playing different emulated titles.
I wonder how Melee runs on the Steam Deck.
Probably pretty great. I mean, everything that I've run so far has been fantastic. You can check playability and you know, compatibility for emulated games. So just look up, you know, the emulator in question compatibility list, and you'll find you know, user reports on what works and if you need to do any tweaking to get them working.
I'm gonna
Uh,
Google that. I'm just curious if anyone's done Melee on a Steam Deck. I'm
it's a
sure
good
it's
idea.
like
I know,
popped
yeah,
on.
people are definitely connecting things like Nintendo controllers, like Nintendo 64 controllers, to emulate those titles to the Steam Deck, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's super versatile in that regard, and uh, it works. You know, you don't have to do a whole lot to get it running, and it definitely works well.
Nice. And you mentioned Into the Breach, so I'm guessing like with the advanced edition coming out is why you're jumping back into that one, or is it just because
Yeah.
it's a good Steam Deck portable kind of game?
Well, I would say both. I mean, again, I think the Steam Deck is at its best when you're playing titles that aren't necessarily suited to a $2,000 gaming computer, but are still fantastic games, right? Into the Breach is one of those for me. So really, I had a lot of fun playing that game, and now playing it on the Steam Deck is perfect. Just, you know, sitting on the couch or whatever. Because I don't always want to sit at my computer to play these titles. I want to play them in different places where I might not, you know, have access to a powerful system. And yeah, Into the Breach is one of those. The Advanced Edition is pretty cool. It does add a lot of like really nice little features and just content to the game that wasn't there before to make it feel new. It was always, I felt, a little bit light in terms of enemy types and even the different classes and characters. Like, good overall, don't get me wrong, but there could always be more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's been
I
nice
still,
for sure.
even with what I had, I still got like around 200 hours I think with it. Like I've played that game so much.
Right.
That's one of my favorites, and I'll just take a minute here to talk about this as well because I have been playing Advanced Edition, and there's a lot of other games out right now, so I haven't played as much as I would like, but I also do want to take my time with it and just be able to enjoy it for like a few months or another year or something like that. But I'm really surprised with how much stuff is in there, like tons of new enemy types. I think there's like 5 or 6 new classes, and then obviously all of those classes have new weapon types that you can unlock as you're finding stuff, some new characters as well. And I just feel like they've got super creative because I was like, man, I feel like they kind of took this idea and did like every possible permutation of like what a weapon could do with the formula already. But then like somehow they came out with this and like here's just a ton of new stuff that just
Right.
feels like it always could have been there in terms of how it just fits in the game. There's no new mechanics or anything like that. It's just like creative uses of what's already there. So
Yeah,
I've
so
been like
nice to
just
see with
absolutely in love
smaller
with it.
studios like continuing to add content to their games so long after launch. Yeah, definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, and that one too. I mean, that update is free, and the game's already pretty cheap, so it's like definitely a no-brainer. And I've always played that one on Switch, and almost always handheld as well, so I can just picture it on Steam Deck being a perfect place for that as well. I actually did buy they're doing a limited physical run for that Advanced Edition, and I'm like, I just love this game so much, I absolutely want it on my shelf or just to
Yeah.
look at it physically. So I picked up that too, even though I already own the game. But yeah, shout outs to Into the Breach. That game is fantastic. And the other thing too I love about the DLC is I was curious, like, man, I feel like the original game, the base game, had such a good balance to it. And if you were like maybe going for a certain build, I mean, it's a roguelike, so you're never gonna guarantee like, oh, I'm gonna get this equipment on this class, that kind of thing. But I love that for all of the parts of the DLC that are new, you can like check it on or off. So you
Right.
could say like, I want to check out the new enemy types, but maybe I'm happy with what the base game has in terms of classes. So you can just check on only the enemies, or you can check on, okay, I want the new classes, I want the characters, but I don't want the new enemies because I like what was already in there. So I feel like that way, I mean, one, it's good for newcomers because like just start with the base game first, like play that for 20 hours and then introduce some of that new stuff. So I really like that. I'm glad they put that in there. And then I don't know if have you checked out the unfair difficulty? They added a new difficulty. I played it once and it was like fucked. Like the
I am
second
not
turn, there's
good
like 4
at
of the
Into the
purple
Breach.
enemies. Like, it's
I
crazy.
I think I unlocked like 90% or 80% of the classes when I played it originally, but I did most of those on normal. And I think, you know, I had the rare game where I tried to play on hard and most of the time died. So unfair is just not for me in that game. There's just too many permutations in each possible move that you make that makes it a little bit too advanced for my simple brain.
Yeah, and I think the unfair, like just the wording unfair is correct because if they just called it like I don't know, other games call it like nightmare or legendary, something like that, it would feel possible, but I think unfair is actually a good term, because sometimes like you'll have the perfect turn, but then just with the way things slide out, there's just no way you can possibly defend like every
Mm,
possible move, because they're all purple pretty much, so you're not gonna be able to kill them all with like an upgraded class, and like there's just too many of them for how many actions you have. So just there, I just feel like it. I mean, I'm sure there's like extra pros who have been able to do it, but to me, it just feels like you could play the best possible like 2 or 3 turns in a row, and then the fourth turn, like you'll just get screwed, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So I do think it could be unfair, but yeah, you don't need to do that to unlock anything. So it's kind of just an added bonus for, I guess, the hardcore people. I still have to. I've beaten the game a lot on hard, but I want to get all the medals for hard on every
right.
class. So I still have a lot of that to do before I think I would genuinely want to check out unfair. It just seems a bit too much, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's there. Why not? It's a good
Yeah.
option to include, I suppose.
Yeah. And then, just looking forward for me, like I'm really happy with the games that I'm playing right now, but I do have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of titles that I've installed here that I'm looking forward to playing on the deck that have been verified on the deck. So might be worth checking out if you already have a Steam Deck in
Right.
hands or picking one up soon. Uh, One of those games is Chicory, A Colorful Tale.
Nice.
That game looks really interesting. I love the art style of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always kind of into those more, you know, indie creative games that can just be kind of cute and fun to play
Mm-hmm.
through.
Do you
Uh,
do you know if that one, like if you can use the drawing on the screen feature in it?
I would imagine you could, and given that it's fully verified, odds are you will be able to. So,
Nice. That's cool.
yeah, I can't say that 100%, but
Yeah.
I don't expect that they would give it the verified status if something like
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't working. Another game, Disco Elysium, which I
Nice.
almost beat on desktop and fell off just towards the end, but then they added all the extra content in the final cut. So,
Mm-hmm.
looking forward to going back to that one. I love the narrative, the branching narrative in that
Yeah.
game. And I think it's just incredible how they went about creating a story that could be played from so many different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, I had a lot of fun playing it. So I think it'll be good to go back to. I think it's more of a book. Have you played that one, Dylan? Have you
I
tried
haven't
Disco
yet.
Elysium?
It's on my backlog.
Yeah,
And I will get to it at some point. I just know that it's a pretty long experience, and I'm sure it's one that I'll want to play multiple times through to really, stretch it to its limits. So it's on my list. I think maybe mid lower of the list, but I will play it someday.
I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you're looking for something that is more story driven. That's what you have to be there for. But they do a great job of laying out the story and keeping you moving through it.
And
Um,
worth mentioning too for that one, I think it does seem like a game that is good to have on the go, or at least in that handheld form, so you could, you know, just play it on your couch while you're chilling, something like that. And from
Totally.
what I've heard, the Steam, or the I should say the Switch version is not the best. Maybe they've improved it or had some updates in there to make it better, but I just heard it doesn't run the best, or maybe it's like hard to read stuff. I'm not sure what it was exactly, but hopefully Steam Deck's a better way to play it than the Switch is, or hopefully the Switch has patched it and it's become better since then. From what I've
Yeah,
heard.
again, deck verified, so I expect it should run quite
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the last one I'll say, Untitled Goose Game. I never actually got to
Nice.
play at launch, but a fan favorite, I'm sure. So
Yeah, I still need to play that one too. A good co-op game. I'm sure I'll play it in co-op, so that'll be fun.
yeah,
Okay, let's then talk about, as we're kind of winding down here, looking to maybe some things that are kind of either in the pipeline to be added, or things that you would like to see get worked on or improved. I guess I don't have too much to add on this particular topic, just because I don't own one personally. I haven't messed around with it enough, but yeah, I guess I'm curious if there's any just software things that you would like to see improved in the coming months or a year.
yeah. For me, there's two things that would really be nice to haves on the Steam Deck. One would be like an audio menu, audio balancing by
Mm-hmm.
applications. If there's one thing that if there isn't already a feature request for, I will go and personally make a feature request for. It would be that. Just because when I have Discord open or something and a game, I don't want to always have to go into my game
Mm,
settings, tweak it, and then retweak it later on. I'd rather just
right.
kind of have my operating system's audio manager be the
Yeah.
single source of truth for volume. So
On a
uh,
quick access, preferably, kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I expect that will get added. It just feels like kind of an obvious one to me.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, the next one would be when you go into desktop mode as a new user to the deck, the controls are pretty pitiful or non-existent. You have the right touchpad, I believe, is the mouse, and you can click by pushing it in. And you can pull up your keyboard by using the typical hotkey, which is across the whole system, which is the Steam key and then X. So you have to like kind of know the hotkey and then use it in desktop mode to bring up the keyboard. So it's just cryptic. You go into desktop mode, it doesn't tell you how to do anything really. It doesn't walk you through it at all. It's just like, well, you're here now. And it basically expects you to now have a USB-C hub where you have your keyboard, mouse, and monitor all plugged in. Right. But if you want to just use the Steam Deck in desktop mode, which to me is a huge advantage of having the Steam Deck, then you're probably at a bit of a loss. And yeah, so that's definitely one thing for me that I would like to see improved on the Steam Deck. And that's one that I think they've announced they're going to be revising in the future. So should be around the corner as well.
Okay. What else?
Yeah, well, I think there's just so many doors that are able to be opened with the Steam Deck now, and also with Valve being more involved in developing hardware that uses Linux. So whatever we see, I think a lot of it's going to be community creations and not necessarily directly coming out of Valve. Like I said before, EmuDeck was a great addition that made it super easy to run emulators and get everything set up on the system. But we'll probably start to see more useful plugins and software developed by the community to make the Switch more versatile or otherwise customizable. Because right now it is fairly straightforward in terms of what you are able to do and aren't able to do, and not a lot of people are going out of their way to stretch those bounds, but the people who are kind of creating their own groups to advance it and build on it. So I would just stay tuned to the Discord pages if you're looking to improve your Steam Deck or broaden your horizons on what you can do with it. You'll likely come across more software than what we've talked about today in the coming weeks and months as more people get their hands on the device.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing I was kind of curious about is, and I guess I should have mentioned this at the top, but one thing that me and you are planning on doing is kind of doing a second part to this podcast, but truly just another topic diving into how we think the Steam Deck fits in with, I guess, just the current landscape and what we expect from it in the future, how it compares to its competitors and what we'll see from them in the future and stuff like that. And I think we're going to stretch out into another podcast and add some other things in there as well. That's maybe away from the actual review part of this, so we'll go into some of that. But I'm curious just in this part is, do you expect or do you want anyone to kind of make games that are specifically targeted for the Steam Deck? Now, I think one thing is just like at launch for whatever new game, hopefully Steam Deck is, supported from the get-go rather than like down the line it gets kind of added in later, which I think we will see more and more of that. But I just think like after playing Aperture Desk Job and seeing all the controls that you have access to with the different buttons and the gyros and these touchpads and things, like I feel like someone could get pretty creative by making a game that is, utilizing these features to the fullest. And is that something you would like to see, or are you more just happy with like, okay, for a first-person shooter, there's different ways I can aim, but I don't really need a game that's like really zoning in on like each button being used for some different feature?
Right. What Valve has really built here is a handheld that can be used for anything and is using controls that maybe haven't been available before when we talk about those touchpads and gyro aiming and that kind of thing, which has been kind of locked into the Switch in the past. I personally don't want to see any games made specifically for the Steam Deck. I think all developers should be aware and go, take the extra few steps to make sure that their game can run through Proton or Wine on Linux and ensure that it gets that verified status. Yeah. That's important to me. But the beauty of the Steam Deck and the beauty of what Valve's doing here is that there is no locked-in ecosystem, which is a first, I think, of its kind for any gaming handheld. And I don't think it could be overstated how important that is for games in the future and game creators and game companies, because instead of having to build titles that are either exclusive or to garner that support, instead you now have access to anything and everything all in one place. So for the end user, that is a godsend because you're no longer, having to buy a PS5 and an Xbox, Series X and One, and the list goes on and on just to be able to play your titles. You can just buy them once, play them everywhere, and that's really how it should be. So, yeah, I think that's important, and hopefully something that will become more of the status quo.
Yeah, fair enough. Anything else in terms of what you'd like to see, improvements, things like that?
I Across the board, improvements can still be made. Like, I'm really happy with the Steam Deck, but it feels like it is still kind of in just a base V1 state. I'd like to be able to customize my home screen more. I'd like to be able to just tweak SteamOS more. SteamOS feels functional and solid overall, but it doesn't give you a lot of options for tweaking where you're able to go and what you're able to do directly from your home screen. It's kind of like, here's what you get, hope you enjoy. And overall, it's good, but I personally like to have those customizations available to me. Yeah, so, we'll see what happens there. I'm not going to hold my breath for an expansive customization suite for SteamOS, but just being able to tweak that home screen would be a big plus for me personally.
Okay. And I mean, that's another thing too, digging into how the community plays a part here, which I don't think is a bad thing inherently, by the way. But yeah, I think that I could see something that like that being added in down the road, where maybe someone makes a mod or something like that. Where you can
already
customize stuff.
People are making mods like that. I would like it to be there without you having to go and tweak the
totally
software.
fair.
So stuff like that I think should be available. Especially a lot of users aren't going to install plugin managers. They're just not into customizing hardware, and I can't blame them. It can get confusing. You can run into problems. In general, it might just feel like a waste of time. So hopefully those types of basic customization options make their way into SteamOS in the future. But really, I think it's overall really a great. I have no major complaints day one.
Yeah, and I mean something like that too, with more customization. That's a good thing for accessibility to people who have maybe certain physical limitations, maybe certain button prompts and things like that are unintuitive. Maybe like even for some people, something like holding the Steam button down and then clicking like whatever it is X to bring up. You talked about some of those specific hotkeys. Some of those things could be hard for some people just based on what they're dealing with. So yeah, I think that is only improvement if they add some of that stuff down.
100%. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I maybe the last thing I'll say, there's already a plugin that does this that you can download for, they just launched it today. It's Steam Deck HQ. Essentially what they're doing is trying to collect user reports on ideal game settings to get the best possible frame rate or experience on the Steam Deck. If you're a user of a desktop PC, you're probably familiar with something like GeForce Experience, where you can just hit, choose the optimal settings, and boom, you're running the game at perfect picture quality, or the best your graphics card is capable of. So I think that should happen, and I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen in the near future directly on the Steam Deck without you needing to use plugins or anything like that. So we'll see what happens. There is a community tab on each of your games, so I think it would make sense for it to show up somewhere in there, or in the game info tab. Just something like that would be really nice to see.
Right. All right then. In closing, the review part of it, you could say, I'm curious, who would you recommend the Steam Deck to? Like, what kind of user, what kind of gamer, if there's a difference between those two, and what you could do with the Steam Deck. And then I guess afterwards, well, actually, let's start there. So,
Sure.
Do you have any recommendations
Yeah.
in terms of just that front? Like, who would you pitch this to? What kind of user is going to get the most out of this thing right now?
I mean, pretty much any PC gamer is going to enjoy having access to a Steam Deck just for playing games on the go. So really, if you're someone who has thought about or currently owns a gaming laptop, and you want something more convenient, something that isn't needing to be lugged around all the time, the Steam Deck is absolutely perfect for that. You can plug it into a USB-C hub, hook up a monitor, keyboard. You can go LAN at your friend's house that way, no problem. So it's really terrific for that portability. Beyond that, I don't know if I would say the Steam Deck is the perfect device for a kid, which is often when these handheld devices are marketed towards or
Sure.
built for, you know, whether it's Sony's PlayStation Vita or PSP or the Nintendo Switch. Like they're usually catering towards a younger demographic.
Sure.
And I don't know if the Steam Deck is perfect in that regard. I would probably still say the Switch has the edge there, just in terms of being absolutely straightforward to use. You know, you really can do no wrong. It's so straightforward. It's foolproof in some sense. I think the Steam Deck has that, but really where the Steam Deck has the edge is in terms of the power users and the tinkerers of the world, having a device that can do anything they want, wherever they want. And yeah, I think it's really powerful for that reason. So if you see yourself as a power user, as a PC gamer, the Steam Deck is something that you should be looking at. Even if you've considered a gaming laptop, odds are the performance of the Steam Deck is going to be more than adequate for you gaming on the go, unless you're truly someone who will only be satisfied with 144 hertz, even if you're in a parking lot, right? Like to me, that feels not absurd, but just overkill. Like I'm not going to get anything out of it. I'd always be happier playing on a lighter, simpler device like the Steam Deck.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess it's also worth mentioning, like if you are someone who maybe comes from the console background, you've always just been a console gamer, never had a PC, or you've never really used Steam, then yeah, I mean that's going to be a different experience too. Or if whenever I get a Steam Deck, like I'll have whatever it is, 100 games, something that I have on Steam ready to go. If I get Game Pass going, that's another like 200 games I'll have access to like right away without having to do anything. But yeah, if you've never used Steam before, or never had a desktop, then you're gonna have to start from scratch with your library there. So that's maybe something to factor in too, in terms of how much use you're going to get out of it if you don't have any games and you're going to have to buy every single game that you do want to jump into. Now, with the current price point, we talked about how you're pretty happy with what you have right now in terms of features, and obviously there's always improvements that could be made. But yeah, do you like with the price point? Do you think it's at a fair point right now? Would you maybe recommend people wait for a price drop and then jump in? Should people wait for more refinements or for more, I guess, games to be verified to be playable, or do you think now is a good time? And I mean, even if you order it now, you're not going to get it for several months or something like that. I don't even know.
Yeah, that's right.
If you
several
order
months.
Today, I actually have no idea where you'd go in the pipeline in terms of when you can expect to get.
I think it's still quite a ways off. If you order today, you're going to be waiting quite a few months. They've definitely ramped up production. So I would hope for something like Q1 of next year, but I couldn't say either what the queue is at currently. That being said, absolutely. I waited 9 months to get my Steam Deck, and it was a little bit painful, but I am just as happy with it today as I would have been 9 months ago. I don't think the industry is going to move forward in that time. The Switch is still very much in its prime right now, and it doesn't seem like Nintendo's looking to launch anything this year. So, there's not going to be any major competition to the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck does hit kind of a demographic that has never really been addressed by console manufacturers before. So if you want to get the Steam Deck, order it sooner rather than later, and wait for it to come. You won't be disappointed, is what I'll say. The price point is absolutely reasonable. I think it's under market value for what the hardware actually entails. I mean, really, this is using a custom AMD chip. And if you just took that chip and put it into a laptop and were to just put that on the market, you would probably still be selling that laptop for as much, if not more, than what the Steam Deck is selling for, despite the Steam Deck having all of these additional features in its hardware. So, I think the price is absolutely reasonable, no matter what angle you come and look at it from. Yeah.
Good stuff. Any final points here on the Steam Deck? I mean, we've kind of touched on the way, but I was very happy with it when I was holding it and playing it. Checking it out, and I think I will get one at some point. I think it's my priority right now is like new TV and then PS5, and then I think Steam Deck might be third, and hopefully a Switch doesn't release like a stronger Switch, because that might jump up my list too. But I don't know. I maybe that sounds like I'm not interested in it, but I do think it is great. I guess my laptop's pretty good, and I do a lot of gaming on there, so I do get a lot of that, away from the desktop gaming. I guess you could say that's a weird way to word that, but it is a great system, and obviously you feel that too. But yeah, anything that we did not touch on today. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of tackling this thing from most angles.
We definitely have. We'll talk about it more in part 2 if and when we get around to that. But I think it is so great that this device is running Linux and kind of taking Linux to the next level for desktop users. If you're someone who knows nothing about Linux, everything you touch on the internet or in a store, it's all running Linux at the end of the day.
Right.
Like most things in the background are using Linux, whether it's embedded technology or the database that your files are being stored on. We're recording this podcast that's going to play, and likely the file will be stored in a Linux server somewhere, halfway around the world for users to access. So like the underlying structure of the internet and a lot of the technology we use is powered by Linux. It's open source. It's built by a community of largely unpaid users and developers. And the focus of Linux has always been for it to be a free and open tool for people to do whatever they want with. And it feels like Valve is really taking that the next step to the average consumer and saying, we've seen so long devices and consoles that are locked down. It's not really yours. If you want to tweak it or change it, you're going to void the warranty, and we're not going to make it easy for you to get replacement parts or anything like that, or to do fixes or repairs or modifications yourself, or to tweak the operating system. It's all very locked down, closed ecosystem environments. The Steam Deck totally breaks away from that and opens up the door for so much more in terms of end user hardware that I think is so important and really great to see. So that's what I'd like to close on.
Sounds good. Cooper, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, like we alluded to, the episode will not be called part 2. It'll be, but I'm sure Steam Deck or Linux or Valve, whatever it is, will be in the title. I think that'll be an Out of Mana episode, and I'd say look forward to that in August or September. We don't know when we're recording that yet, so it might take a bit, but within the next couple months, I think we're going to plan to do that one. So yeah, look forward to that. Thank you again, Cooper, for joining me. This was a lot of fun to break down, and I'm excited to have you on the podcast again. I think probably pretty soon, outside of just that episode, we've talked about some other games that we're both looking forward to this year and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's been my pleasure. Been my
Mhm.
pleasure to be on here, Dylan. Thank you so much for having me and indulging my avid fandom for the Steam Deck, Valve, and everything Linux.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, I usually put together like show notes for these kinds of things, and I'm filling it out. You went above and beyond. Like most people just like put in like a couple games they've been playing or maybe one announcement they want to talk about, but you went so detailed that made it like very easy for us to kind of plug through this and make sure we didn't miss anything. So a big thank you for doing that. And yeah, since this is coming out, or since we're pre-recording this, I don't know exactly what's out on the feeds around when this is releasing, but just subscribe and you'll make sure to see all that stuff. Thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you once again to Cooper, and we will see you guys again next time. See ya.